issue, which is smacking. A ban on smacking your children. It's become one step closer to becoming law in Wales after votes in the Welsh Assembly yesterday. Now, at the moment, parents can smack their children without leaving a mark by using a defence called reasonable punishment. But this legislation would remove that defence in Wales. It's been passed in Scotland, but not coming into force until later this year. Is that right, Kirsty?
That's right, yeah.
But let's just show you, this is how it was covered in one of the Welsh newspapers. It's the Welsh Daily Post, and it says, smacking ban could end careers. Government mulls bill opposed by 70% of Welsh councillors. Is it just symbolic, introducing a ban?
No, it's not symbolic at all. I mean, adults have got protection against being assaulted. There is laws that prevent adults from being assaulted. This is putting into place equal protection for children. It's taking away that right of the kind of reasonable discipline or whatever it was called. I don't think it's right to smack children. I don't think children should be smacked, and I don't think just because you didn't leave a mark that you know, means that the child is unharmed by the experience. It is still assault, and that's why we have put the law in Scotland.
Labour support it in Scotland and Wales, do you?
You know, I've looked once again at the evidence of where smacking bans have been brought in. The BMJ did a review of 400,000 youngsters in 88 different countries. And it found that as a result, where there was a full ban both on corporal punishment in schools and smacking at home, that incidence of aggression and violence amongst young women and young men was reduced. There's also some evidence about benefits on mental health. Look, I understand why some parents think, you know, it's only a light tap. What's the problem with that? Why is the state interfering? But I think if you look at organisations like the NSPCC, who want to reduce violence against and abuse against children, they're in favour of it. They say it sends a signal about the kind of society we're in, and as ever, I'm driven by the evidence, and that suggests to me it's a good place to go to.
Do you think then parents in Scotland and possibly Wales should face criminal charges if they smack their children without leaving a mark?
Absolutely not. I'm afraid I completely take a different view on this. You know, I first of all think this is unenforceable at the end of the day. I walk down a street in my constituency where young mums are struggling getting kids to school, and they've got other younger kids, and there's a bit of chaos, and occasionally they'll go like that, stop that, because one of them's screaming and they can't get their child into school when they're a bit pressured. What are we going to do? Prosecute them for doing that? That's an absurdity. Most parents, genuinely most parents, it is an absolute last resort when something is happening which you need to regain control over. The idea of the state constantly entering in and legislating for what most parents recognise to be an unusual moment is absurd, and it's unenforceable. And what you're going to get if you try and enforce this is a whole bunch of younger mums in real trouble in front of the courts, many of them who simply wouldn't be able to afford any of the fines if there were fines. This is an absurdity, and we've got to recognise there are limits. Advisory, yes. Educational programmes about how you discipline your children, by all means. But for God's sake, getting the criminal justice system inside family lives to this extent, when there are so many other problems with young kids that you want to deal with, mental health problems, that you don't want to get into here, I can tell you that now.
My children and my husband would agree that I am by far the stricter parent. I am very strict with my children. They have to, you know, follow the rules that I'm setting out for them, that me and my husband set out for them. But I don't smack them. You know, I think there are different ways to ensure that your children get dressed and get to school in time without smacking them. I think it's completely inappropriate to hit children.
Absolutely mad.
And, you know, just full stop. I don't think we should be having an argument about that, because it's inappropriate to hit anyone.
But you want to criminalise them? That's the step.
Children.
It may be inappropriate for it, but now what do you want to do? Criminalise parents who are trying their best, decent people who are not out to beat up their kids. We're talking about corporal punishment. That's a different issue altogether. This is smacking, sometimes very light chastisement, at the end of a real problem when there are some stresses. A kid may be about to run into the street, that sort of stuff, and they're in a bit of a stressed moment. What are we going to do? Prosecute them? I think that's madness. Educate them by all means. You want to be a strong parent and you don't want to smack your kids? Great. Help educate parents about how best to do that.
You could use the same argument about the smoking ban. What are we going to do? Are we going to prosecute people because they smoke in pubs because they're having a bit of a stressed moment?
No, that is a clear choice about what you do.
So you are going to, I mean, you are literally expecting to prosecute parents who are, caught in public?
I'm genuinely expecting that what people will do as a result of this, that they will think about their behaviour, they will realise, actually, it is inappropriate to hit my my child, and they will modify their behaviour. And it's the same thing as the drink driving ban. We've put into place a drink driving ban. That means that people now in Scotland very, very rarely drink drive. It very rarely happens because people just don't do it, and they are criminalised if they do.
Does smacking your child make you a bad parent?
Well, you know, Ian was saying that, you know, we've all been in situations where we see a parent on the tube getting into a rage because their child has done something wrong and they smack them. And, you know, for all this, like, you know, kind talk about, you know, it being stressed mums, I feel like when I've seen that, it's been like, you know, it's been dads with anger management problems. I really think that it teaches children such a horrible lesson about authority, about self-respect, how you're meant to relate to people that you disagree with. You know, I mean, like, you get into adulthood, you're not allowed to hit people anymore. Why is it acceptable in childhood? I think, and then, you know, the evidence backs that up. You know, it's not good for children's mental health.
You're going to criminalise parents. Let's not get past the argument of is it right or wrong to occasionally smack your child. What you're now accelerating that through to is the criminal justice system getting involved in parenting and prosecuting people
no, I think the
for
point
something that
is,
they're doing to try and correct their child at an extreme moment. I'm sorry, I just don't buy that.
The point is,
and anyone that brings up lots of kids will actually recognise there are moments when that happens.
The point is, do we want it to be socially unacceptable? I think pretty much, you know, most of us
by all
are in
means,
agreement.
say you shouldn't do it, but don't start prosecuting
parents. But if it gets to the point where we
making
decide
them criminals.
where we reach a consensus that it is socially unacceptable for parents to be hitting their children, then I think that the law needs to come behind that.
But I think there's a difference between smacking and child abuse.
Exactly.
And there are laws in place already to really tackle child abuse, whether that's physical
But the
or
fact that it's
sexual,
on
other
a
things.
spectrum with child abuse is in itself an absurdity, isn't it?
I mean,
Does there need to be a distinction, though, between the two?
but you know, it's a light tap, but if it becomes a harder tap and it becomes more regular, then it veers into child abuse. That, you know, that
Parenting
is
is
silly.
tough enough without the state finding its way into every single aspect of it. You know, the vast majority of families manage these processes carefully and with goodwill. And I think the moment you start stepping in and trying to criminalise parents at certain key moments, I think it's just madness.
Cindy?
Why do you think that the NSPCC supports it, Ian?
Because I think the SNP, by and large, supports quite a lot of state intervention into this, and I just don't support that. I think there are things that...
they deal with
well, I think there
the
are things...
extreme
There are
end of
really
this with
important
child
issues
abuse.
around child abuse and everything else. This, if we get distracted down this road, this is madness. I think child abuse and real problems like that have got to be sorted, yes. But this is a kind of tokenistic distraction, and I think we should just say, look, you shouldn't do this. If you can avoid it at all costs, advise, etc., but not criminalise parents.
I mean, if there are links, though, between the spectrum that Alva was talking about, if it is a case of reducing the amount of general violence against children, of which there is a lot, making it socially unacceptable, could it be a good thing?
I mean, if the consequences, you mean, are actually working. But, I mean, I find it very hard to think that this law would actually be effective in terms... It might be effective in terms of preventative, but in terms of actually prosecuting people after the fact, I find it difficult to believe that if you were to witness a family member smacking a child, that you would then report them to the police. Yeah. I find it very hard to think about how this would be policed. I accept that there's a preventative, like the smoking ban, there's a preventative sort of notion about it, but I don't know. I mean, in terms of Wales, public opinion is not on side with this ban. So politicians are not bringing along people with them, and a ban like this from top down, I don't really know if that's a way to change opinions.
Kirsty, as we said, it's being brought in later this year. Obviously, you will come on before then, but we will find out what happens in Scotland in terms of measuring the impact and success of it. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Let's talk about the Labour leadership